Bullshit.
Johnstown loses a sports legend. It's the No BS Marketing Show. I'm Dave Mastovich, CEO and founder of Massolutions, the world's only no bullshit marketing firm. Carlton Haselrig of Johnstown has passed away, and he's someone that I've known throughout most of my life, and my brother knew even more intimately as a reporter in the Johnstown Tribune-Democrat, but also as the sports information director at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown when Carlton was there. And Carlton Haselrig is just one of the most amazing stories that there ever can be told about a human being. And yet he was humble and didn't like to have his story told, and that's why he's not a household name. In fact, ESPN reached out years ago to ask to do a 30 for 30 on Carlton, and he told them no. And that pretty much typifies the humbleness of Carlton Haselrig. He was an amazing athlete. He would say things like, bet on me, and you knew to bet on him. What is the story of Carlton Haselrig? He grows up in Johnstown in an economically depressed area during a tough economic time. He's going to Greater Johnstown High School, which is a city school district and a school that does many things well, but has an unfair reputation that we've always tried to help change because they do a lot of good. But Carlton grew up going to Greater Johnstown High School, and they didn't have a wrestling program there. He played football, was a very good football player, and just a tremendous athlete. The thing that always impressed me about Carlton is he would say these phrases in the heat of the moment, and these phrases I've heard stories from close friends. I've been witness to some of these stories. I've heard stories from my brother, but he had a phrase that I used as a coach. I just would tell my teams the whole story about Carlton that I'm about to tell you, and he had this phrase that he said, "Somebody's got to win. Why not us?" And I loved using that as a coach because if you're overthinking things, which many of us do in the heat of the moment in an athletic endeavor, what a Carlton could do is snap you out of it. And that phrase could snap my teams out of it because the reality is this: when you're battling and it's a close game, somebody does have to win. So somebody's got to win. Why not us? Forget about all the other bullshit and just go out and win the damn game. So Carlton didn't have a high school wrestling program. He decided to continue training for wrestling and petition the PIAA, the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association, to allow him to compete in the state playoffs without having wrestled a single match. And he ends up getting approved to do that and proceeds to win the state title. Think about that. He was going up against other wrestlers who had 30 matches that year, maybe 100 in their career. He wins them all. He wins every match, and he wins the state wrestling championship without having really a high school coach, a high school program. He had people helping him out, but he didn't have the benefit that every other wrestler that competed in that state qualification, that state finals had. And that was Carlton. Bet on me. Then he decides to go play football at a Division II school when he's unhappy. You would talk to him at a party in the summer or during that year, and he'd say he wasn't happy. He decides to transfer back to the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, to the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, where they had a really good wrestling coach, actually Hall of Fame wrestling coach by the name of Pat Pecora, who was already doing great things. But once he got Carlton, the two of them took that program to national prominence. What Carlton did as a wrestler at the Division II level is unparalleled and will never be matched. Is that hyperbole? No. Carlton won the national championship 3 times at the Division II level and 3 times at the Division I level. He won 6 national championships, collegiate national championships. It will never be done again because there is a rule called the Carlton Haselrig Rule that the NCAA instituted after Carlton graduated. You can no longer compete at multiple levels. So no one will ever win 6 national titles in any sport in the NCAA. There's one person that did, and his name is Carlton Haselrig. So I've already told you some rags to riches, etc. That cliche about rags to riches. And what rags to riches really means is you were in a tough situation, you fought your way out of it, and you got to the riches, you got to the promised land. Well, Carlton would have this happen again and again. And he was human, and he had his human frailties, and he had problems that brought him back down, and he'd fight his way back up because he always said, bet on me. So he goes to a high school that doesn't have wrestling, and he decides to petition the PIAA, and he wins the state championship. He comes from an economically depressed area, tough upbringing. He goes to college. It doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. He's playing college football, doesn't work out. Do you know how many athletes don't play college sports? Years ago, I looked up the stat, and it was something like 6% of high school athletes go on to play in college. Of that 6%, I think the majority of them quit after 1 year. And the majority don't play at the high level. So when he was done with that first year and came back to Johnstown to go to the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, the assumption was, all right, it didn't work out. So he comes from the tough beginning, hits the top by winning that state championship, goes to play football in college. He's back down again. Comes back to UPJ, becomes a wrestler, and wins 6 national championships. They have that strong program that goes to the whole next level, and that program was built around Pat Pecora and Carlton Haselrig. He was 143-2-1. Those 3 numbers, think about them again. 143 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. 143-2-1 as a UPJ wrestler. They come up with the Carlton Haselrig Rule, which prevents him from prevents anyone else from matching Carlton and being able to compete at multiple national championship levels at multiple classifications of Division II and Division I. He then runs into a little bit of controversy at UPJ. He gets his name pounded in the media for being at a party, and some bad things happened, but he was come away from that without being he was ended up not even being tried or anything. He was accused of these things, and he was mudslinging in the media, and he was down again. But Carlton would never stay down because he knew that he was not involved in these bad things, and he fought through that. And he goes and gets drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the Pittsburgh Steelers at the time had thought about, they'd saw Carlton through Pat Pecora and talked to Pat Pecora at UPJ, and Pat had told him how strong he was. And if you want to get the details on all this stuff, there's stories written by my brother Mike, and Pat Pecora's quoted all over the place. Just a great interview with Pat Pecora. And he talked to the Steelers brass, and they decided we're going to take him. And so they drafted him late when there were more rounds in the draft. And we all, congratulated Carlton, high-fived him, had a beer with him, whatever, but didn't really expect much. So then at that time, I was actually working in the media and covering sports, covering Steelers, Pirates, etc. So I got to cover them during some of the glory years when Barry Bonds and Bonilla were here on the Pirates side, and the Steelers were not so strong early, but then Cowher came and they got to be much stronger. So I'll never forget a colleague of mine driving down on a Sunday to cover the Steelers, and we just got a field pass. I'm not sure how we landed that because normally they just put you in the press box. But we got a field pass, and Carlton was on the practice squad. And what the practice squad was if you didn't make the team but they thought you had promise, they paid you at that time, I think it was $1,000 per game. So I think Carlton was making $16,000 during the season to be on the practice squad. And I remember him talking about the monetary aspect. And I can just remember I went to a couple games, and he was allowed to stand on the sideline, and me and my colleague would stand on the sideline with him, and we would just talk and just bullshit. And he was just always this humble guy. He was no different when he was standing on the sideline of the practice squad. Well, you might say, oh, he's only on the practice squad. But to me at that time, I'm like, he's on the practice squad of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he didn't play college football. Let me say that again. He was on the practice squad of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he didn't play college football. Then about a year later, he ends up starting. And we're like, Carlton's starting. And his nickname was Rig. Rig's starting. You believe Riggs is starting? Look at that. Check him out. Then you start hearing from people in the Pittsburgh organization who've had some great offensive linemen saying how Carlton is the most gifted offensive lineman, has the best technique. Then he becomes a Pro Bowler. He makes the Pro Bowl. So he's recognized as among the best at his craft at the highest level in the National Football League after not playing college football. Somebody's got to win. Why not us? That's Carlton Haselrig. But Carlton had some demons like we all do, and he had alcohol to the max, drank a lot, and started to have some trouble around that, and ended up having to leave the Steelers, went to the New York Jets for a season, and made all that money in the NFL, but wasn't able to parlay that as well as he could have. But one thing about Carlton was he was always humble, always kind. Would see him after all that happened, and he didn't hang his head. He would say, "What's up? Talk to me," and talk to my brother, talk to some of my other friends. He was still the same Carlton. Well, he started looking at this UFC stuff, and he decided at a very advanced age to jump in and do UFC fighting. And he ends